Hey everybody, Coach Root here. Today on our Principles of Training series, we're going to be going over an article I wrote called The Body Composition, BMI, and Health Explained. So let's go ahead and get right into that. In exercise physiology, the goal is to use the study of the body's physiology related with that of the demands created upon it by environment, movement, and nutrition. In this pursuit, we try and use research created using scientific method, statistical relationships, and the experience of professionals. Some of the most important methods in exercise physiology and health are those of screening, assessment, and diagnostics. These measurements let us know what the initial state of the body actually is. But after finding out what the state of the body is, we need to ask another question. Well, what does that mean? What does a certain state indicate? So we need to ask, after we find out what the state of the body is, we need to find out what the importance of that state is. This is where our measurement of the size and composition of the body as a physiological state has some issues that we need to sort through. First, let's look at the way that we look at body composition. The first way we look at body composition is through body mass index. Body mass index was devised in the 1830s. It is a simple height to weight ratio and statistically correlates with mortality and health. It is used widely for health and life insurance purposes all the way up into today. The way you look at the way you find out your BMI is you can either look up the calculation for BMI and use your height and weight for that, or you can just look on this chart that I have right here. As you go through and you look up the actual article that I have, you can look up on that chart, or you can just look up BMI chart online, they'll have it. And you can find your height on the side and then slide over until you find your weight in pounds, and your BMI is listed on the top using this chart. BMI information is useful BMI information is useful, and if you're over 25, over 25 is about where you start, the overweight category starts. And especially if you're over 30, where the obese category starts, you should consider that you likely have some serious health risks that you need to examine. The problem with BMI is that it doesn't differentiate for different body types that may naturally be healthy at differing height to weight ratios. In looking at the above graph, the BMI chart, I should say, so I say chart, not graph, this distinction is important in areas that border the green. So when you start getting into this yellow area that we look at right here, there are some people with some body types that can start inching into that yellow area, or not depicted in the graph, there's another area of underweight people who might be depicted as being underweight, when it really is more their body type is one that can be a little bit more healthy and is just naturally healthier in those areas, the areas bordering the green. However, anywhere else is still a major concern. So if we look at areas more into the deeper yellow, or if you're severely underweight, not bordering the green, but really getting into that area that's not on our chart right here, but is severely underweight, or you start getting into this red, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about if life insurance, if your BMI is at 26, so you're just barely over into the overweight area or something like that, and life insurance is charging you an extra fee for being being overweight or whatever, they're really not taking into account other factors. So now you may consider what kind of body you have. Take a subjective look at your body from the image below, this one, and where do you fall? Endomorphs, these people over here, may have a difficult time staying out of the yellow. Ectomorphs may find it difficult to stay out of that area of underweight. So these people might statistically fall in somewhere that's underweight. Well, that's really not the reality. They're really not underweight. And these people might find they're, slightly overweight, and, statistically, but in fact, that's really not, that's really just how the body type is. So after body mass index came body composition as a measurement in the 1950s. So now we have an association of not just how much total mass versus height you have, but how much of that mass is fat. So body composition does account somewhat for the aforementioned issues with regard to the body types. We again see a statistical correlation with health and mortality. So if we look right here, here's a standard body composition chart. We see essential fat, and then we have these categories right here: athletes, fitness, average, and obese. While body composition is useful, it is also misleading in some ways. For instance, if we have a 300-pound bodybuilder who is 6 feet tall and 15% body fat, we'll say that's non-competition, because in competition it'll be a lot lower than that. He is labeled here as an athlete. His BMI, though, says that he's obese. So what's the real correlation to health? Is it body fat or is it BMI? And what does this mean? Well, we have to consider that his internal organs still have a high demand on them that could cause health issues. So BMI is still important. So labeling him as BMI, labeling him as obese, even though his BMI is high and his body fat is low, is still accurate, because the relationship correlating with being over muscled to having health issues is less than being over fat. So if you're over muscled, your internal organs still have to provide nutrients, and they have to do their job at a much higher capacity. They have to do a lot more work for someone who weighs a lot more, even if that's muscle. But the relationship to health problems caused by having more muscle than you need is a lot less than somebody who has a lot more fat than you need. So body composition becomes an important piece of information to plug into the algebra, and that's an analogy. You'd love to have that algebra with it, but there is no such calculation out there. So a professional will have to kind of consider, what's the weight of those two things? How big is that? If you're at the very obese end of BMI, and you're over muscled, well, that might still be a high risk category for you, even if you have low body fat. And so, kind of have to think about these things. So the last issue that comes up with the chart above is, what is average fitness or athlete? Who is average? What kind of fitness? What athletic event? So is athletic an NFL lineman, a sumo wrestler, or is it like a long distance runner? So now we're taking into account, what is those body types that we looked at above too. You're going to have a certain body type that's going to be an NFL lineman or a sumo wrestler. And then you have a certain other type that's going to be a long distance runner. Both of those categories of athlete may be healthy, and they may be very good at their athletic event. So correlating that with body fat percentage, where there's no real science to that, is kind of false when you take it into, when you're putting it into the same graph, or the same chart, I should say, as something that does have statistical correlations with health. So that's a problem. So then we might have. So what do we go on to say here is that, let's see, there's an obvious sidestepping of the statistical correlations to health we see in the BMI and ranges of body fat used and associated with disease. Instead, these other categories are just sales tools wrapped into a health screening. So for example, let's take the following scenario. You have a personal trainer. sir, you're just average according to our test. And then the person, but I want to be athletic. And then somebody from the outside, a professional from the outside, like me, would say, is what you're talking about correlated with heart disease? Then the trainer says, it just says here he's not athletic, but average. So, a lot of times, the people doing these things haven't taken those sort of correlations into account. I know this because I was in those positions for a very long time. And so I would suggest the following in terms of body fat. And you notice that we alleviate the other categories that were in there and replace them with ones that answer the questions, what does that mean? Is it statistically related to health or is it not? So basically we correlate it with the BMI test. So the body fat and BMI can be both weighed the same by a professional. And so we have essential body fat. We want to make sure that we have at least that. Anything under that is, and even these essentials are fairly low, is going to be underweight. Healthy, we can see the healthy range is right there. Then caution, or where on the BMI chart you might see those yellow ranges as well. And then we have the obese. So we can weigh those both equally. And that's it, folks. Hope this was helpful to you in view of this subject, and hope you enjoyed it.